want to learn, you have to first listen.
Welcome to episode 23 of Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know, a podcast to feed our curious minds. I'm Matt O'Donnell, and I want to know who you are. I want to know what you do. I want to know why I have had to open the packaging for a pair of scissors only using another pair of scissors. I want to know what matters to you and why. I've spent the past 15 years as a professional bass player. That means I've covered a lot of miles and talked with a lot of people. I've found that the person deeply interested in a topic is often more interesting than the topic itself, and the bigger picture is found in the details. That makes for a fantastic excuse to share conversations with people who I think are great. You're in the right place, because this time I am joined by the prolific BMX Flatland rider Terry Adams. This was a truly incredible conversation, and I want to get to it as soon as possible. But just hang with me for a real quick second here at the top. Thank you, the listener, for the continued success of Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know. I was crunching some numbers before, and if this episode meets even a decent projection of what I'm expecting, then November will be the most successful month for the podcast so far. I've mentioned before that it's been really cool to start seeing what I would consider are numbers of substance digging back into the back catalog every day. It used to be that in the week in between podcasts, the numbers would taper off pretty hard, which makes total sense. I get that. That's cool. But nowadays, that's not really true. There's serious listening going on to episodes that are in the back catalog. I wasn't ready for that, I guess. When I say I wasn't ready for it, I just mean I hadn't really thought about that being something that would develop, and it's cool to watch it happen. It's cool to look at the list of episodes and look at the numbers for that day and just see that there are listens scattered all throughout the list so far. That is humbling and wonderful, and it's all thanks to you. Now, I usually save this part for the end bit, but sometimes I think it's important to have it up front that I would love it if you are here and while you're listening, you go like the show on Instagram, share it, rate it on whatever you're listening to. Go rate it everywhere. If you listen to it on like Apple Podcasts, but you also have Spotify, go rate it and like review it twice. It's all helpful. Those things are tried and true methods of growing something like this out. I just said that we're growing, and I am all about it, but let's grow it out like a bad haircut, huh? Yeah. As I said, in just a minute or two, you are going to get to hear me talk with BMX Flatland rider Terry Adams. Terry is super close friends with episode 5's guest, Robbie Klein, and so that whole little group of people I know because of Robbie and my wife Amanda, they're all tied up in a nice little community. But I had only met Terry, I think, once legitimately before, and maybe in passing another time. However, when we did Robbie's episode of the podcast, Terry reached out and said how much he liked the episode, and I took that as an opportunity to say, well, man, I would love to have you on. Very quickly, he responded that he was into the idea. If you're doing some simple math, that was back in the spring. And so it was just a matter of when I would be in Louisiana with some recording gear for it to happen, and that came to pass just about a month ago. We got together over at Terry's office and had this wonderful talk. Terry is one of the most recognizable athletes in BMX Flatland riding. He won the Ride BMX Magazine NORA Cup in 2003 and 2008. He has also been all over the X Games, as well as some appearances on TV shows like Glee and The Ellen DeGeneres Show. He is also a longtime Red Bull athlete. There are tons of things I am leaving out. You can go look them up. He's got a ton of cool magazine covers and photography out there. To put it quite simply, he is one of the most visible and influential voices of the Flatland BMX scene. He is also a lovely and thoughtful and mindful guy. We talk a bunch about meditation and mindset and just tenacity. It was a super lovely conversation. I had such a great time having it with him, and I also had a great time hearing it again as I prepped it here for release. So, without further ado, here is my discussion with Terry Adams. When I see podcasts that are like people that are like 3 feet away from a mic, I'm like, I don't know how they're getting good audio out of that. Like, I think to myself, I need it to be closer to get really the kind of quality that I'm looking for. Cool. Let's dive right in.
Dude, we're getting into it.
Man, your Wikipedia page says that someone's starting to work with you on a memoir and a documentary. Is that a thing?
Yeah, does it say that?
It says that on your Wikipedia page.
Well, the crazy thing is I didn't think anyone's like updating that.
Oh, it's like in the top part of your Wikipedia page.
Really? Because I actually was checking it for a minute and I'm like, man, this thing needs to be updated. But yeah,
Sure.
so right now there's a book that's being written as well as a documentary that'll come out next year.
Sweet. Well, I'm glad that I got in before that so that I don't need to be worried about asking all the same questions. That'll be things that get revealed in the definitive Terry Adams story.
Yeah, yeah.
But all that to say, I'm curious how you feel about being at a point in your life and career where there is some definitive stuff like that it's retrospective time. And how does that feel to you?
It's kind of a tough transition, honestly.
I bet.
Because my entire life has just been all about this dream and trying to make sure I do everything I can in my power to keep living this dream that happened. And it was a childhood dream, from 10, 12 years old. I wanted to be a professional bike rider. And then when it happened so early on, I almost like made it this like next dream, this next goal to like never let it go. So I really spent the last 20, 30 years doing everything I could in my power to like not take it for granted. You know?
Absolutely.
To where when it did kind of slip away there for a little bit and I started to lose focus and I was, I guess, at like a valley in my career, not at a peak, then I ramp things back up and feel like I'm in the best shape of my life. I feel like as far as the skill level on the bike, I feel like I'm at the highest level I've ever ridden at. But then again, I also have to be realistic to know that I am 41 now and there will be a time I do feel like I have to start, I guess, preparing for the future. There will be a time where bike companies are not paying me and big brands aren't paying me. So it's been quite the transition to kind of start thinking about the future. Because if I'm being honest, I probably haven't really accepted the fact that one day that part is gonna be over. But with that said, I would like to think that I can keep myself physically and mentally well enough to keep riding, no matter I'm getting a paycheck to ride or not, Yeah,
I guess that there are a couple things there that I was thinking about that sound right. Like, I'm a big baseball fan, and that's the thing that they always say about baseball players, that like, you're playing, no matter how old you get, you're playing a kid's game.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine that riding is the same kind of thing. Like it's a thing that kids do. And so the notion that you get to do it and have been able to do it for this long in life is like a real achievement, but there's still something like continuously youthful about it.
Yeah. I mean, they look like kids' bikes, you know, they're BMX bikes,
sure.
but a lot of grown adults make a living from riding these bikes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've always said that like all the riders that I looked up to when I was 12 and 13, I've always kind of said like in my 20s and my 30s, like these guys are still riding and they're still riding at a high level. And a lot of them still are. So there's a couple of those guys. They're great friends of mine, but like I'm in my early 40s. There's some guys still in their mid 40s, like late 40s that are still making a living from riding.
You know, we talked forever ago, the first time you and I, about like doing this. And I thought to myself that I would really need to do some homework about BMX to be able to like have an intelligent conversation. But I did not really do that. I got enough in and stuff like that. But when did BMX like really become like a thing? The reason I ask, like, so we can sort of think of it this way, is like, is it still young enough that it's hard to know what the end looks like or like how long you're supposed to do it? Like, has anyone truly aged out yet, you know, in real terms?
You know, like all the riders that rode in like the 80s, like some of those guys are still like weekend warriors. You know, they're like the guys that made a living in the 80s. Yeah, they're not like competing at a high level. They're not even competing. The tricks that they did were very, I guess you'd consider them like old school tricks that these guys were doing in either movies or contests back then. But a lot of these guys are still around. Like, you know, they're maybe in their mid 50s, early 60s, but I just seen an ad a minute ago where one of them's like releasing one of their bikes from the 80s. And,
oh, wow.
And a guy just had a book written about them. And they're still involved in the industry enough to where like, I know their names. I know that they're still out there doing things. So I guess to answer your question of it is a very still young sport. I mean, it just made it into the Olympics, you know, so it's growing, and especially my discipline, it's growing bigger in other parts of around the globe, you know, really big in Europe and Asia, well, mainly Japan. It's super big.
That's cool. I mean, I was just telling Amanda the other day, we were watching a video of a bass player. It was the jazz bass player, Jaco Pastorius, who is like every bass player's hero or one of their heroes. And I was saying to her, I was like, not only is he amazing, but when he came out in like 1976, the electric bass was only 25 years old. The electric bass was invented in 1951. And so like you can think of anything that is, you know, a discipline like that. And at 25, nobody's figured out what the capabilities are. And so for someone to show up and just be like, whoa, you can do that with that is like a whole thing. And I was thinking about that. I feel like, you know, riding is probably in that same kind of phase where there are like opportunities for people to unlock, you know, the next door that hasn't like really happened yet.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this, it's definitely an art form that's infinite. Like the amount of tricks that are being invented even right now since we've like started this podcast, it's just it's outrageous. You know, it's not very hard to pick up a bike, and even for me right now, I can go and pick up a bike and have a million ideas of things that I know for sure that's never been done. But the challenge is actually getting out there and like making one of those tricks happen. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, stuff's created every day, and it really truly is like an art. And the discipline of flatland BMX that I'm in, it's very common for riders to just be extremely original and not copy other people's tricks. You know, it's infinite enough to where you can fully go down your own path and not ever copy someone's tricks. I mean, in the beginning, you have to learn your basics, and
of course,
but a lot of the tricks that I do are tricks that really no one does. And I can say that about a lot of the other pro riders that's made a living from contests and sponsors. A lot of those guys have their complete own style and set of tricks.
That's cool. Let's stop for a second. And just because since this podcast tends to be very diverse, can you describe the difference in like Flatland versus other stuff, just so we we all know what we're talking about here?
Yeah. So there's a ton of different disciplines of BMX. There's BMX racing is, just going around a BMX track with like dirt hills, and it's actually a race, and I did a lot of that in the 90s. Cool. There's a BMX track in Baton Rouge here in Louisiana that I started at. There's another discipline called BMX Street, and that's kind of what you would see with a lot of skateboarders, where they're just literally using obstacles on the street, handrails and steps, and that's a discipline in itself, to where some guys, like, that's all they do. They find these like organic obstacles of ledges, and that's BMX Street. And then there's BMX Park, which guys that just focus on like going to what like a skate park and riding ramps. And then there's what I do, is BMX Flatland, and I guess the easiest way to describe it, pretty much like breakdancing on a bike. There's a lot of balancing on one wheel and pumping to use the bike as momentum, and flipping and switching all around the bike. And this stuff gets more and more complex each year. So, 15, 20 years ago, it looked completely different than it looks right now. And where it's going right now, it's scary to see what a lot of the kids are doing and what they're making these bikes do in BMX Flatland. So it's very interesting sport, to say the least.
Yeah, man, you saying that makes me think about, I always end up, of course, like, this is what we do as humans, end up comparing so many things that I talk about with guests to music and the way that is. You've been doing it long enough that you've been able to see this. How has the emergence of something like YouTube changed, like, how people can improve or, like, drive themselves forward, like more exposure to seeing people at a high level doing Flatland stuff?
Yeah, I guess where I've noticed a big change is years ago, I would have to order VHS tapes to see these riders around the world and what tricks they were doing. So it was always this like exciting wait of like, what's my friend Lee doing in England right now? Like, what trick is he going to drop? And, my friend Marty in Finland, like, what's Marty going to be doing? And, my friend Ephraim and all these guys in Japan, like, what's going to be in this next tape? And you get the tape in the mail, and it was this exciting thing that was happening worldwide in our community, that we were waiting on these VHS tapes and these DVDs to come in the mail to get inspiration from them. But what it did was it gave us a lot of time to just focus on our own craft and and come up with something that we could release, and whoever filmed us in a VHS tape or a DVD, whatever era that was. And then it was very inspiring way to like put your tricks out, because no one knew what you were doing. You couldn't post and just put it out there.
Yeah.
So where I've really seen it change is how you're just able to put the content out there so quick. There seems to be less originality going on. A lot of like, I don't want to call it copying, but a lot of like trends, a lot of trends, because there's just, there's a lot of influence going on, which before, I don't know what type of rider I would have ended up if Instagram and Facebook and all this stuff would have been around when I started, because I maybe would have went down the road of like following a trend, but I didn't. I was going down a trend of like, I wanted to create all this stuff to like, not to sound egotistical, but to like almost like blow people's minds when they seen the footage of like what I was doing over here in Louisiana. Like when those VHS tapes got released, I wanted to like really stand out. So I just worked on that stuff, worked on my craft. And then when I got that opportunity to get in front of a camera of like a filmmaker that I knew that something was going to be sold around the world, I took it like very serious, as everyone did back then. But now, even myself, I say I'm going to like hold on to clips, even to like put on YouTube, to make like a YouTube edit. I can't even my personality, I can't even hold on to these clips for more than 5 minutes where I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to stick it on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I get it, I get why I call it being trigger happy,
That's right.
Because sometimes I could easily like maybe save some of these clips of me doing what I do and like put them in a folder and then like, oh yeah, I'm going to release a YouTube video. But then
you could do like an old school mixtape vibe where you put out like a full length video that looks like it.
And people do that, but it's getting less and less, I feel like, for a lot of extreme sports, just because, man, the Instagram views just
it dictates so much stuff, and is just how it is. Like,
yeah, I mean, I could put out a YouTube video that's going to get a couple thousand views maybe, and get posted on a bunch of like BMX industry sites, and it's still going to sit around a couple thousand views. Or I could just throw these clips of me doing the same stuff on an Instagram reel, and it might end up getting 15 million views. So
absolutely.
I do get extremely trigger happy, and I just tend to don't hold on to anything for more than like right after I film it.
Yeah, that's such a hard thing. I mean, again, I don't know. We're probably going to spend the remaining like 45 minutes of this talking about, comparative stuff, but it's so much the way of like people that decide whether they need to make an album or not.
Yeah.
Or it's like, no, you have this great song, and unless it absolutely fits with other stuff you're doing, like get it out there, put it out and make it work for you rather than, and also I think that, I said just then like that, you could like do like an old school like mixtape feel, like something that's like a tribute to that kind of thing. Like I recently downloaded as many of the old End One basketball mixtapes as I could find, because that was a whole thing when those came out, like just street ball stuff. When I was a kid, I was the white kid with the jump shot in my neighborhood.
Nice.
Like I was a very good basketball player until everybody got taller than me. I'm not a tall dude. And then like I contend that there's no more emasculating feeling than getting stuffed in basketball. Like if you just get absolutely like just blocked, there are few lower feelings in the world than that. And I just like had to stop. But yeah, the way street ball was that way too. But so anyway, the idea of like being like, it would be cool to do an old school, mixtape vibe from a business perspective or like in a production perspective. I say that as someone I'm only a couple years younger than you are, and so it's like, yeah, but that's to appease me. And it's like, there are now multiple generations of people that, have come, generations keep getting smaller and smaller in time of what we consider to be like, Gen X, millennials and stuff like those time markers end up smaller. And it's like, those things would never resonate with younger people. And so the idea of like being like, well, let's just like, you're saying like trigger happy and like just throw it on Instagram, like makes sense because that's the consumption model for the people who are hungriest for it.
Yeah. And even just the trends on how things are posted, like there's probably a smarter way for me to put this content out there. Even the way I type the caption could probably draw more attention if I'm speaking to a younger audience. But I try to just be myself and just put the caption that I would want.
Authenticity is super key. Like, that's the other thing too, is social media. It's so easy to smell a fake, and if you're just trying to be that way, like as opposed to being like your authentic self, I think the authentic self always wins.
For sure, I bet the engagement, if I did like say a month test on like, I'm going to study how like these younger kids are posting and if they're using emojis and if, the way they're speaking. Yeah. And I think the engagement would probably be higher, So like you said, I just try to keep it authentic and it just goes where it goes.
Yeah. So like, let's jump back. Like, how did you get into like wanting to do it? And not so much like, you don't need to so much tell me the whole like story of, because obviously again, like riding bikes is like such a quintessential thing. Like it's hard not to be like into that for most people in some way, but like, how did you turn that into something that you thought was a feasible way to live your life and stuff like that?
Yeah. I'll jump back and say that, I thought I probably should say this, is that I was definitely a kid that was struggling. I was in special ed classes. I couldn't read. I couldn't tell time on a clock. I didn't know I was dyslexic as a kid until I got diagnosed, but
we're at an age where it's hard to, so many people slip through that until
I was just struggling in school and I didn't really know why. You know, I was just felt out of place. I just didn't really understand anything that was going on ever.
Yeah.
So the first time I really felt free was not really when I got like a bike to do tricks on. It's just when I got like a bike and when I started pedaling, it was like the first time like I felt like I was in control and there was like no rules to follow. And I just, because my mom was trying to, just outside of school, was trying to put me in baseball and guitar lessons and all this stuff that had like directions. I was drum lessons and just karate, all this stuff that had like rules and with following directions. I mean, literally I was running around the bases backwards on the baseball field because I just seemed simple, just run one way. But for me, I just felt like I was always doing everything backwards and didn't know why, you know? And then when I found that bike, I was like, wow, this is great because I felt free. I felt like for once I wasn't being judged and I could do my own thing. And then when I actually discovered like people doing tricks on bikes, and it really fit because there was no coaches or rules or directions. And the more I learned about it, the more obsessed I became about it. And I never really thought as a kid that it's something that I could make a living from. I just became obsessed with like wanting to be in the magazines and wanting to be a pro rider. I didn't know that money came along with that.
Sure.
So the moment I found out that like I could actually get like a paycheck from riding, it was like a flip in my brain that, man, I want this even more now.
Yes.
Like there's a way to like keep doing this. So my walls as a kid were just covered with Flatland BMX photos. And back then, a BMX magazine that you would get from like Books A Million or, you know, Barnes & Noble, whatever, it was a 200-page magazine, but the Flatland photos in there, it would only have 2 or 3, maybe 5 Flatland photos in the whole magazine. But I would just rip those pages out and just obsess over those riders. And really, it kind of led to me at a very young age, not only obsessing over the riders and wanting to be as good as them, but I almost became obsessed at a young age of like wanting to be sponsored. For whatever reason, I had this like obsession. I'm like, I want to be sponsored. I didn't even know what it meant. So I was actually going in the magazine and dialing all these 1-800 numbers every day, just getting people on the phone as a young kid.
Man, that's cool.
Yeah. What I didn't realize is I was actually gaining business experience by talking to people. You know, a lot of people were obviously picking up the phone and saying like, come on, dude, you're a kid.
Yeah, of course.
Don't worry about this stuff. Don't worry about it at all. But, you know, a lot of these guys were in their mid-20s and early 30s picking up the phone, and it really kind of worked to my advantage because then when I did start going to contests and my parents started bringing me, those publications were there. And they were shooting photos, and they're like, "Wait a minute, is that the kid that keeps calling the office in Los Angeles?" And I was the kid, you know, I was the kid calling all the bike companies because no bike companies are in Louisiana.
Yeah, of course.
They're all in California, you know. But I was finding those 1-800 numbers and calling them as like a 12, 13-year-old kid and saying like, "I want to be sponsored," you know, sending them tapes. You know, have my mom film me, send them tapes, sponsor me tapes, and they're like, look, just keep riding. Try not to worry about being a pro. But
it's cool that they told you that.
Yeah.
Like that's, you know, just the fact that like you didn't get like laughed off, that was like something that like there's at least like a seed of encouragement there is really special and something that like not everybody gets when they're kind of like blind ambition pushing into a passion that way.
Yeah, and that's why I take kids really serious if they're going that extra mile to like write a letter to me or write an email or, you know, because man, those guys didn't have to pick up the phone for me.
That's right.
You know, they didn't have to like take the time to speak to me. And man, I'm still in touch with a lot of these guys that picked up the phone and that just had these conversations with me because a lot of those conversations did end up later in life ended up being like great relationships that put me in different places in my career to where they remember it. They remember me as like, yeah, I'm 41, but they're like, yeah, I remember when Terry was calling when he was a kid trying to get sponsored. So it's really kind of worked out because, like I said, I didn't really realize it at the time, but I was really kind of building a blueprint back then of like not giving up, you know?
Yeah.
I was riding as hard as I could, but I was also kind of building this resilience of like, being told no doesn't mean it's not ever going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So then later in life, when I was like really trying to get sponsored because I was traveling the world and I was reaching out to new companies, I was fine with getting like 50 no's before I got a yes. Later in life, I became obsessed with that side of it, the business side.
Yeah. And also it's funny that you say that about being told no. Like I just got a no email from someone for the podcast last night. Like that would have been like a huge grab, like through someone else. And like, but that's not bad. Like just seeing that is not bad. And the reason was pretty good, but it was just one of those things where it's like, that is fine, you know, especially when it's like a fine response. And then it's just like, yeah, just like now is just not the time for like that to work out and stuff. You know, we're so big now. I think we've really come around in any craft to that, you know, that trope about how like failure is the only teacher, like success doesn't really teach anything. Yeah. And I think that being okay with being told no and seeing no as more of a not now is a nice, like, wise middle ground. Yeah. To like to see that as like a thing that doesn't matter. But what I was gonna say, based on what you were thinking about, was like you were diving into community that way. And like sport like that, again, much the same as music, is like so much built on community and network and connections and stuff like that, especially things that are, you know, at the end of the day, like riding is just you. Yeah. You know, and then you have to take what you're doing and then like plug yourself into the community that way.
And look, all that stuff for me was like, I look back and I'm like proud that I took that approach of like even writing. I would somehow get the pros that were around, I would somehow get their addresses and write them letters. And the companies that I really wanted to ride for as a kid, I would write them these like letters with even a typewriter sometimes back then. And I saved some of those letters and I'm still in touch with some of those people. Yeah. And sometimes I send them the letters. I'm like, do you remember this? And they're like, yeah. And that stuff worked out so well for me, even though it's a bit old school approach.
I write handwritten letters, even to people I know, like, or I'm like, you know, am casually acquainted with. Like, if I take the time to handwrite a letter, I feel like it's immediately noticeable that, like, again, whether it's someone I am relatively close with or whatever, it's more the idea about being like, just in the way the world is, like, I'm proving to you that I care. You know? Yeah.
And people, you know, I would like to think appreciate that.
I think by and large that is true.
As an example, I was showing Robbie and JD this actually the other day, is that I have a cheat night on every Friday night and I do pizza. Yeah. And this Nola Mia pizza place in Ponchatoula opened, and they're not supposed to be doing takeout orders right now because they're brand new and it's just the place is packed. Well, this weekend's their fourth weekend open. Well, on the past 3 weekends, they've very clearly stated they're not doing takeout orders, but I like to bring the pizza home and eat it here and just enjoy it because I'll wait all week for it. Well, they accommodated me and let me sit at the bar, and it just meant so much to me. The other day, I was like, I'm going to write them a letter, and a 2-page letter I wrote just saying like, man, it just meant a lot to me that you guys did that. And because it's not just a pizza for me, it's something I wait on all week. I'm a professional athlete. I just kind of went through the whole thing of like, my son has autism. We don't like eating out a lot. I like to enjoy the food at home. And I went up there the other day and handed them this in an envelope. And when I did it, it kind of reminded me like, man, I haven't changed. Yeah. You know, I was freaking writing letters when I was 12 years old, and here I am like writing a letter to someone in my hometown.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And also the thing about like writing like letters like that to people when you were young in, you know, in the writing like community and stuff like that, it shows such like a testament to that, like in your mind, you already believed like that you were doing it, you know, like it's so, I think that is like one of the most like beautiful things that like young people can like believe, you know, is that like, if you just have the mindset that like you are doing this, you're just only at this level so far, rather than being like, I want to do this. It's like, if you plug in and you're determined, like the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. Thankfully, I was so obsessed about it.
Yeah. That's what I mean is like you, in your mind, you were already that person.
Yeah. I really kind of, like I was telling someone the other day, like it's hard for me to ride my bike nowadays, really over the past 5 or 6 years, and finish and not have tears in my eyes. I honestly can't believe I'm still doing this. And
dude, 5 minutes ago when you were talking about being young and like the way that you felt about it, like it made me misty, because like I can tell like how true that is, and like that is like in your DNA, like it is soaked in that deeply.
It really is. And when I'm telling you, my eyes get teary every time I come in from riding. I'm just like, I literally can't believe it. I'm like, this is crazy. Especially like just recently, I had a lot of footage transferred over from all these VHS tapes because there's a documentary being made about my life, and I transferred over like 100 VHS tapes, and all this stuff was stuff I haven't seen in forever. And I'm looking at it, and it just looks unreal. It's like, this is like going on 30 years. I'm seeing these videos of me as a little kid, literally like looking at the camera saying like, my name is Terry. My dream is to be a pro rider. And it's like, it's hard for me not to look at that stuff and not get emotional, because there's all these moments when I was a kid when I do remember that like maybe other kids doubted me, or even like in my early teens or early 20s, even like some of my close friends maybe thought that it wasn't possible for me to make a living with Flatland being so small. And then there's moments even in my 30s where, you know, close friends of mine, you know, close people that I respect and love, you know, kind of brought comments or things to me thinking that this could be over. So the fact that I'm still waking up and still doing it's very special to me. And I really try everything to not take it for granted. But like I said, there was definitely a time when it did start to slip, and I have to be real and honest about that all the years that I said, I don't want to take this for granted. There was some years, I guess, just things get in the way in life, and you just, with me having such an obsessive personality, that can go either way. Like sometimes even these great things that I do for myself that should be positive, my obsessive personality gets in the way sometimes too much, and it becomes a worse situation for me because of how obsessive I am, you know?
I totally understand that. There are times where like I am I will become interested in something and then just full rabbit hole that. Like I cannot become interested in something without following it to the end of my means of it. You know, like what is the level of like coffee is a great example. Like I'm such a coffee snob, and like the coffee bar in our house rivals like some small shops in Nashville. And it's just like, well, how far can I go with this? You know, and like now I get to like help some friends test the recipes in their like shops and stuff like that, because they trust, you know, that I know about it. But it's like, there have been times where like, I don't always want to say that it's like a negative, though often it's a negative, that like sometimes hopefully it gives me like a minute to breathe out of like what is like out of music or whatever. And then like I can come back to it like not burnt out. Something that comes up on this podcast all the time. I feel like every episode I talk about how COVID was incredible for my music career, because I was grinding so hard and then I just had to stop. And everything I've done with music since having to stop from that has been better, just because of like breathing. But that is different than like spending so much of my mental energy on something else like obsessively. But yeah, like that obsessive thing, I totally understand.
Yeah. Like as an example, like when I decided to like get back in shape, because I had really kind of lost my way as far as my, not only physically, but mentally, I had just kind of like to ride at this level and to compete at this level, you not only have to be there physically, but your mind has to be fully in it. And I had just like kind of lost my way. And when I decided to jump back in, and I guess ride at a super high level in contest and build my way back up, I started like working out. Well, my obsessiveness got in the way. And at first I was waking up at, 5 a.m. and then 4 and then 3. Ugh. And then I started getting in the 2s. But now I'm 3:30 every morning and I'm getting enough sleep. But when I was actually starting to get up at like 2 a.m., there was times when like I know for sure that I just wasn't getting enough sleep, but my personality was getting in the way of just being so obsessive. And I had like a couple friends telling me like, dude, I don't think you're getting enough sleep. And I started to think like, oh, am I going to give myself like a heart attack? Am I stressing myself out here trying to like I just couldn't wait to get outside to get it going, where I'm looking at the stars and the moon, and I still do. Yeah. But now I'm definitely getting enough sleep, but I have to watch it. I have to literally tell myself like, no, it's 2:45 a.m., dude. Like, wait till 3:30 and then go out. Like, just sleep 45 more minutes, because I have to watch myself with everything I do, business wise, riding wise.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe this is a level of obsession that I don't understand. It's like, is like beyond probably like the amount that I think about that. But
yeah, I really have to watch myself, to where, even I had hired a coach, which is not something that you normally would do in BMX. But now that BMX was getting into the Olympics, and there's a lot of this stuff is sanctioned and there's drug tests, I was like, you know what, I'm going to hire a coach. And there was a couple times when my coach is in Finland, and when we were talking, he's like, dude, you need to breathe, because like I practice in the garage. My bathroom is right here. I wouldn't even walk from the garage to the bathroom to pee. I sent him a picture. I had pee bottles in there, like maybe like 40, 50 pee bottles. And I sent him a picture.
Wow.
And he goes,
yeah, that's a lot.
He said, why are you doing that? And I said, because I'm focused. I don't want to walk out of the garage. And he goes, you need a break. Yeah. You need to like a break from riding. So that's one example of how extreme I can get, I have many, but I really tend to take things a bit overboard. So it's been the reason why I've been so successful, but also it's been times where I haven't done so well in life. It's because that side of myself has kind of almost gotten too extreme.
I have this wide held belief, and luckily this is not your kind of story, but often with people that are prolific creators and they end up in some sort of, troublesome situation. And I'm certainly no psychologist, but there's a part of me that believes that like the pendulum swings positively so far, and that the backswing is usually the same amount of distance, that there's like something that needs to be tended to that can be destructive in the same way that like creation goes, that like they are kind of like equal and opposite forces. And it sounds like, you definitely can live in that world.
Yeah. The great thing is that I've kind of learned over the past 7 years of getting myself back where I needed to be in life was I learned a lot from meditation, and that pad you see sitting behind you, so I sit on that pad and meditate every morning. And when I started doing it, I didn't really realize like even why I was doing it. It was just a suggestion from my coach of like, you really need to like learn how to be present. And I started that process to be more present and on like the contest floor, which is just a 3-minute contest run. Sure. He just thought like, man, you're really losing focus on your bike and I think in life, and I think you really need to like focus on just being still. And I didn't understand it at all in the beginning. But what I learned was I started that journey of like just sitting there breathing for the bike, but it ended up being a life change for me because I started to be more present in my entire life.
Yeah.
So yeah, at first I was like meditating because I wanted to be on the top of the podium again.
Sure.
I wanted all these different things. I wanted like more accolades and stuff. But then what it really turned into was I started to appreciate life and riding again on levels that I didn't even think was possible. You know, like it became a totally different thing for me to where, you know, now everything feels better. This conversation right now probably feels better to me now than it would have 7 years ago before I started that journey of being present, because I just had a lot of things going on in my mind that I just had to deal with. And when I mean deal with them, I mean I needed to sit there and deal with them and not push them away, you know? And I didn't really understand that before. I knew I was grabbing my phone a lot, but I didn't realize I was running from something that I wanted to hide from.
Yeah.
So, you know, not to go on about this, but
no, you're fine.
That's one of the things that he noticed is I was on my phone a lot. And he had told me a practice that I want you to do is next time you go to grab your phone, still grab it, but stop and think for a second.
Yeah, acknowledge that you're doing it.
You're grabbing it. And I'm like, why does he want me to do this? You know, but being who I am, I would stop, and he's like, I would still grab it, but I would think. But then I realized later on what he was having me do was realize that really the definition of being focused is just recognizing a distraction. So it doesn't mean you're going to be like focused all the time on like, I got to do this great podcast. I got to do this great writing session, this great music session. Like all it means is like you're being distracted from something and you recognize it and then come back. And that was the first thing that I realized. But then sitting on the mat and breathing, I started to realize that a lot of times when I was grabbing that phone, I was running from things I didn't want to think about.
Sure.
You know, it's like there's a lot of things from my past and stuff I maybe didn't want to face. And so if anything was coming in my mind about something like that, I was always grabbing the phone to distract myself. And so years of sitting on that mat, I've learned a lot about myself and like those certain things I was running from. And now I prefer to like sit in silence a lot of times. You know, I have not used my dishwasher in going on 6 years now. Really? Because I enjoy sitting there and drying off those dishes.
Man, I love cleaning a kitchen.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, it turned out to be good for a while there in the beginning of owning a food business, you know, with Amanda. But like there's something great about just like cleaning a kitchen, something that getting a dish clean is a binary act. It is clean or it isn't. But so you don't have to be thinking about the level to which it is clean. Like you can be in that.
Yeah, I literally hand dry every dish every time for 6-7 years. And it is like a form of meditation for me because it's like, you know what? I'm not perfect. I'm going to get on my phone a lot during the day, but that time for me washing dishes is like, I know for sure, like I'm in the zone. I'm gonna do this the best I can and try to be as present as I possibly can. And nowadays, I think everything feels better. You know, riding feels better. When I do eat healthy or bad food, I feel like my taste buds are better because I'm more kind of tapped into how I should feel. Yeah, which probably is why I'm coming inside from riding and have tears in my eyes because I'm legitimately getting those same feelings that I had when I was a kid now, but they're even stronger.
It's so hard. Like, it's so hard to not have that dissonance, you know, like to have like all that noise and like stay keyed into that thing. Like, I think of that all the time. I say that to a good friend of mine. We have these discussions about music all the time where I'm like, you should want to go out if you're playing live music. I never want to go on stage and not feel like I did when I saw people do it, or like feel like, what must that feel like? And then experiencing it for the first time, you know, early on and being young and like what that was like, and like stay connected to that. Like, I think there's so much, and it's life, right? Like, there's so much more that is expected out of the average human being to operate in society
Yeah.
in a way that, keeps you tied in with your family, tied in with making sure you make money, all these things. Like, it's a lot of noise. And when you do something that is craft based and stuff like that, staying connected to the like source is so hard.
Yeah.
And finding ways to keep that going is super important. I do not meditate. I think I should. I've always thought that I should. And I just never, I wouldn't say that I have a problem with being present in things. Like, I just sort of choose what moments I think are like the ones to be present in. I love fine dining, like you're talking about like taste buds and stuff. And I think to myself, like, if I know that we're going to go do a meal that's going to be like 12 courses, 2.5 hours, like I'm dedicated to this. I'm dedicated to thinking about this dish and stuff like that. But I think the meditation could be really helpful for me.
When I mean, I could speak on it for hours. Yeah, because I just love it so much. It really did change my life, like 150,000%. Like I was a different person before I started doing it. And all it really took was like being consistent with it. Because it's almost like the more I did it, the better I felt. Yeah. And it's almost like the way I explained it to Robbie and a couple others that started meditating is like someone that's been meditating for a year is going to feel better than someone that's been only meditating for 6 months. Yeah. So same as like if you try it a week, maybe you're not going to feel that much, but if you're on it for like consistently for 3 months, it just starts feeling better and better. So like,
and it's a lifelong process. Like I know people who have been meditating. Like I know some guys who have been meditating since they learned that the Beatles were meditating, like in the 60s, and they still feel like they are only so far, like in that journey. They will speak to how vastly improved their lives are year over year of like maintaining that discipline, but think to themselves, but there's more.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like I'm like, man, so like I've been on this for like 6 or 7 years, like, but I'm sure someone that's been doing it for 10 years even feels better than I do doing it. So it's very interesting. And, like I do it on the mat for 25 minutes and then I do a walking meditation and I literally like walking up and down the street, just really slow on a guided meditation on the mat. I'm just in silent, just breathing. But, just scanning my body and just like scanning my mind of like, even in the mornings, just when I do it, it's kind of gives me an opportunity to like see where I'm at right now. Yeah. Like as far as like, am I super stressed right now? Is my mind racing? Just being a little bit aware of where you're at. Yeah. It kind of almost gives you a little bit of peace. Even if you are starting your day and you're just like frantic with things you have to do, sitting down for a minute and just being aware of where you're at every morning is almost kind of a way to like check in with yourself and say like, okay, I'm kind of all over the place today. Yeah. Just having that awareness, you can kind of like, you move forward in your day a little bit more efficient, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, so you talked about how that's been like great for both, your personal self and your riding self. I can see where people, may hear you talk about like that amount of time that like meditation is given to, and then, think about like the time that you spend practicing, or like developing, for competition and stuff. And you said a minute ago, like, did you say a minute ago that like competition is like 3 minutes? Like that's about what it's like, or just regardless of what the time is, like that you are prepping yourself
for that 3 minute
run. A very distilled experience, and that like to be able to do that at such a high level is,
that's what's very tough about it, is because that's what I'm essentially doing. I'm preparing for a 3 minute run, but I could go all the way, and it's happened many times where I go all the way to the south of France or China, Singapore, everywhere, Japan, to where that 3 minutes on the stage doesn't go so well. Yeah. And then I have to live with that until the next contest, and sometimes it doesn't go well, but sometimes it really doesn't go well, to where it could be very difficult, long plane ride back. And then you're kind of faced with this fear of like, this could happen again. if you don't figure out a way to like stay focused and stay present, you know. But then I almost have to find peace, and those times it didn't go so well, and I would be lying if I told you that's easy to find peace with those those moments, because those moments are difficult, you know, because you can think you're as confident as ever, but then you show up there, and sometimes that, for whatever reason, that confidence level can just drop, you know, and you're like, if you start getting in your own head that something bad can happen 9 times out of 10, if you're in your head enough, then something bad is going to happen, and you're not going to perform the way you want to perform. Yeah.
Mindset is crazy. Like, you know, again, talking about how deep you can get into meditating and how much better you can feel year over year about it. You know, human beings are incredible, and like the untapped potential of like what humans are capable of is truly, I don't know. We have not seen probably the beginning of what humans are capable of. And so like being in touch with and trying to be the best, you know, like that you can do, because you can only be yourself.
Yeah. And the visualization stuff is really crazy, because I was doing it for a while at the end of my meditation sessions of just kind of like visualizing what I wanted the run to go, and even like if I have a mistake, how I'm going to recover. And I did that so many times to where what it did was I actually had played it out in my head to where I would start to show up at these events and I was less stressed, because it already played out in my head so many times on like, if I make a mistake on minute 1, this is how I'm gonna, to where there was this comfortability to where I'm like, I've already done this in my head so many times. Not only I know how it's gonna feel when I finish and it's gonna be great, I had even visualized up into the point of like who was gonna walk up to me and shake my hand and give me a hug, and like to where it was almost like I was living in a dream a couple times, to where it's like, yep, this is exactly how I envisioned getting this first place trophy, you know? Now, I'd like to say that worked out every time, but you know, I know for sure those times that I did very well, it brought me to a good placing, because I was so locked in and so focused on, you know, visualizing that stuff and wanting it to happen.
Yeah, man, that's cool. That's great. I think that it takes getting older a little bit to like really like come to terms with like that kind of thing. I think that it's the same reason why like Amanda and I were just talking about Metallica the other day, and I was talking about how much I loved Metallica when I was young, and she was like, do you own any Metallica on vinyl? It's weird that you like don't own any music by this band that you love. And I was like, well, youthfulness was filled with an energy that only felt related to by that amount of like speed and intensity and stuff like that. And you know, I listen to so much like folk music now, and that's because like there's just this mastery over intensity with control in a way. And I think that a lot of that like comes with age and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're right. Like I look back and man, even 10 years ago, I'm just a different person, you know, the way I think and the way I move, the way I treat myself. And, that's my goal now, is to just like not get stagnant. And
if you're not improving, you're in trouble, you know, in some way or another. Like people that are scared of like improvement or change or things like that, like that is a surefire way to ending up in places like that you will realize too late are like things that like you don't want to be in. And like giving into that and like working with life and all that stuff is how you get forward to that. Real quick before we like keep going down some of those rabbit holes, when you have seen some of these VHS tapes from like when you were much younger, do you see the rider that you are now in those tapes, or have you like really changed that? Because I think about like early tapes of hearing myself play bass, and I go like, you know, by and large, there are things that are definitively me that are in there.
Yeah, I think what I can see is the ambition I had, you know, if I had to point something out to where it just made me a little different, is that I didn't know it, but I was my obsession back then is definitely definitely the same obsession I have now, and it definitely.
Does that make you feel better or worse?
I'm glad that I was born with it, you know, because I just, we wouldn't be sitting here right now, you know, there's just no way. But when I look at all those tapes, it's almost unreal that, that the obsession that I had of wanting to just ride all day and all night and to have those sponsors and to ride that bike for a living. It's unreal to like look at those tapes and just say like, man, how did this happen? Well, that's how it happened. It happened because that obsession was so strong as a child, that I was probably riding, in my mom's driveway. I probably would ride like 11 hours a day before I was able to like leave the house, and before I had permission to like go. Then I would like practice in parking lots.
Yeah. I've heard about the Hobby Lobby parking lot.
Like
the
Hobby Lobby lot, bro. I would probably get there at 8 a.m. and I would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner there.
Wow.
And I would just be out there all day, you know? So I kind of have to pay tribute to like, you know, that was where people rode back in the day. Nowadays, you know, Flatland's a little bit bigger, and we've realized we don't need that big of a space, and cars are in our way. So that's why I have that pad in the backyard. You know, a lot of guys just build their own pad now.
Yeah, sure.
I like to call those places like my stomping grounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because it allowed me to really stay focused, because there's cars and there's people screaming out the window and people stopping to watch. And, you know, I met a lot of interesting people out there. That's where I met Robbie Klein, pulled up in a truck with a camera and asked to shoot photos of me. That's where I met.
So neither of you changed.
Oh yeah. That's how I got into money management and finance, because Ed Hoover, that owns a lot of property here in Hammond, stopped out and told me I couldn't be riding in Hobby Lobby parking lot, and he owned it. And so I built that relationship, and he came in as like a financial mentor. And so I met so many interesting people hanging out there, but it only happened because of Flatland, you know, like I wouldn't have met Robbie because of Flatland. All my best friends that I have in life are because of Flatland. What I have, like, isn't because Flatland brings in a lot of money, but it's because of the people that I met that helped me like realize what to do to manage my money. All that stuff came from like, they see me riding a bike, and we started talking and built a friendship, a relationship. And so I'm extremely grateful for those things that Flatland brought me as well. You know, way more grateful for that stuff than like that I actually kind of made this dream happen. The fact that 100% of the people in my life pretty much is because of this bike, you know?
Yeah.
So it makes it even more special, you know?
Yeah. It's a beautiful dichotomy. Again, I was saying before about like the parts of doing, you know, of riding that are entirely contingent on you, like buckling down and like figuring it out. And then like these other parts of who you are that are built on, you know, relationship like that. Like it's equal measure. Like it's it seems to be a very balanced weight, you know, like that's super cool. Hey, how did you end up never leaving Louisiana? I had thought about this because it's just interesting. Also, Robbie mentioned like that's like one of like the most incredible facts about you, which I knew, but in terms of like things that could be worth talking about. And then you said much earlier in this talk about how, you know, most of the companies that you were trying to reach out to were in California and stuff like that. Like, how did you end up deciding that like this was still like home base and not like getting out there?
I think early on when I realized that like taking that extra step that I could get a hold of these people just with the phone, you know, I almost feel like I had like, it wasn't rocket science that I was staying in touch with these companies and getting these sponsors, but it was kind of like I realized early on that like I don't need to live somewhere else. I just realized that I had a feeling because as an example, and I bring this up only because I think this was a moment I really realized it, is 2005, I came up with this trick called the Katrina, and I wanted to get it on the cover of a magazine, and that magazine was Ride BMX Magazine. It's that one right there at the top. And at the time, that magazine was everywhere, you know, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, everywhere that has magazines. But that's the same magazine that I was calling as a child. So I had built this relationship with them over the years, and have had graced all the pages of it. But Flatland was so small that it hadn't been on the cover in, like, at that time, in probably over 10 or 15 years.
Oh, wow.
But I, again, took that same approach even in 2005 that I took in the mid 90s. And I called them and said, hey, I got this new crazy trick called the Katrina. I learned it during the storm. Like, would you guys shoot it for a cover? And their response immediately was like, Terry, you can't ask for a cover.
Yeah.
You know that's not how it happens. But if you come out here, I know you're always in LA and you have sponsors here. If you come out here, we'll shoot it. And you never know where it'll end up.
Yeah.
So that was enough information for me, enough hope to go, let me get on a plane and go over there. So we went, it's like on the side of a building, and I ended up shooting that image. And the next month, it ended up not only being the cover of the magazine, but that same year, it was my first year winning the NORA Cup, which stands for Number One Rider Award. So you see on the cover there, it says NORA Cup. Oh, so yeah. I ended up winning the Rider of the Year award and getting the first Flatland cover in like over 10 years. And I think that was a moment where I really realized that, like, I can do this all from Louisiana. Like, that's cool. Like, yeah. I just like somehow finagled my way onto the cover and won the Rider of the Year. So I always kind of look back at that moment because it was a moment in my life, really, not even my career, a life that I knew that I could, like, make anything happen if I just grinded away and just, like, didn't take no for an answer. Yeah. So of course I got many no's after that, but but I always went back and used that as like, man, if that worked for that cover, can I get on like all the BMX covers? And as you see, there's 4 covers there. And so I ended up using that same method in that order. I went from the Ride cover to the Plus cover to the Cream cover. It was like a trickle effect where I'm like, I'm going to start asking for covers. To where I got a little out of hand with the asking. Sure. To where,
well, you're obsessive. Yeah. So you got way too down that hole.
As an example, and this is the last story I'll tell about asking, but the second NORA Cup that I won was in 2008. And the way those cups work is your peers around the world vote, like the other pro riders. Well, I had this like crazy idea of like, I'm going to ask everyone to vote for me.
You went on a campaign.
And which is like, you're not supposed to do. But, you know, I pretty much knew everyone that was going to get a ballot, and I emailed each one individually and I said, hey, man, I know you get your own vote, but, you know, I won this contest in Germany. I won this contest in Australia. I believe that I deserve to win this year. And a lot of people like didn't respond. Yeah. But enough people responded back to my emails and said like, you know what? Sure, dude. You got my vote. Yeah. And so I actually walked into the award ceremony in Las Vegas that year. I kind of knew. Yeah. And, you know, I hate to even say that, but I kind of felt like I had enough votes where I'm going to get the cup. And that's probably only something you can do one time in a career. Yeah. You know, it's to like, it's just not something you do is ask for those votes, but it worked. So I've always also used that as an example and something that I remember that I did in my career that was very unorthodox. It's not something that's like probably wouldn't be accepted. Yeah. But it worked. You know?
But man, think about any awards scenario, not just in sport, in anything. Yeah. When there's a feeling of a snub and people can immediately go, well, all these things happened for this person this year. Like, look at like sales or viewers of like any of these things. And it's like, that's how snubs become such a thing, and like the fact that you made a case for like having the credential for that year to do it.
Yeah.
And you made it happen. Like,
yeah,
that's not as abrasive as you might think, or as someone might think.
But I kind of knew the riders to not go to,
Sure.
like I kind of knew, some of my friends in France, like, they're gonna laugh so hard if they get this email. But, after I won, I got a call from one of my good friends that lives in Paris, my friend Alex Jumelin, and he's a French rider. And he was in a bar, I could tell. And it was right after I won the award. He goes, "Hey, I have a question." I'm like, "What's up?" And he's like, "Did you send an email?" Because at this point, people were they heard I won, and word was starting to trickle. Like, yeah, he asked me to vote for him. And so Alex like, "Did you ask everyone to vote for you?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he goes, "Oh my God, you're a gangster." And he hung up. But it was a time where, like, even though I didn't ask him, he respected that I did it. But that's another moment that kind of like reassured me that I did the right thing by staying around Hammond, because I was like making example after example that I can do this from here, Yeah.
Man, that just speaks to so many things, that we've already talked about and stuff, but it's just another example of like how, like I was going to ask you when I first started asking you, and then you began to answer, like being like, you realize like how rare that is, right? Like that most people would be like, well, I got to be in the place. Like if I'm going to do the thing, I've got to be in the place where the thing happens. And you decided to and proved the way for not having to do that.
It was definitely a question out at Hobby Lobby when I was out there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that you never thought this, but like when it came to it.
Yeah. But I'm saying it was definitely a question from other people. When I'm telling you, it's probably in the thousands of people that rolled down their window and goes, "Why don't you move to California?" Sure. Like
everybody assumes that you're going to go to the place for the thing.
Yeah. Like so many people rolled down their, I don't spend a ton of time out in the parking lots anymore, but I guarantee you if I went out there every day, 7 days in a week, someone's going to roll down their window even today and go, "You should move out of here and try to do something with that."
Yeah.
They just assume that because I'm here in the South that maybe I haven't like made it in that world.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. I mean, it allows you to keep a low profile a little bit.
It's been awesome though. Like it's, I still look at those places as like my stomping grounds. Like even though I got my spots here at home, sometimes I load up and I go back out there. And what's been funny is over the past couple months, going back to those old parking lots, people roll down their window or they get out their car and they're like, "You're not the same guy from like 25 years ago coming out here." They're like, "I was a kid.
Yeah.
And my mom used to come out here and I think I would watch you ride. Was that you?" I'm like, "No, it's me. I'm the only guy here." And these guys are like now have kids and they have like gray beards and they're telling me they used to like come out and they're like, "Man, my mom would stop and you would let us watch." And I'm like, "That's awesome, man." And they're like, "Hey, are you still doing it?" I'm still doing it. So that's actually been kind of cool to go back and people stop out and say like, "Man, you're not the same guy that used to come out here from the like 1998, huh?" I'm like, "Yep,
sure am."
That's me. Like, "You still doing it?" Still doing it.
Incredible. Man, that's beautiful. Real quick, I mean, and we'll finish up because I can't think of many better ways to like finish up than some of that stuff. But what's the future look like for you?
Like we kind of started off in the beginning and talking about like, the end of all this.
I mean, I would say one way or another, I hope this doesn't like give you heart palpitations, but like in some ways, like, I mean, hopefully not, but like, at least in career world, like you are on the back nine.
Yeah.
Which isn't bad. I mean, when you say back nine, that means that there's half to go, but like.
Yeah. I mean, look, I guess I'm really starting over my career. I've enjoyed a lot of things, but what I've really kind of looked back and those most important moments and the moments that I've really feel like I've really connected to are times that I've like helped out the other riders coming up.
Yeah.
And I've really kind of fallen into that a bit to where it's those things are kind of maybe what I more want to be remembered by when I am done competing and when I'm not so prevalent in the media for BMX anymore. It's like I would love to be known as like, I remember when Terry got on the phone with me and helped me with maybe buying my first house, or like giving me advice on how to save my money, or how to obtain that next sponsor, or how to keep a sponsor that I have. I really liked that part of it, of like giving those riders advice.
It's super important. I mean, like that's it's only in the past 10, 15 years that most of like the major sports leagues have been doing financial stuff in their rookie camps. Being like, okay, you're about to make a bunch of money. Here's how not to screw it up.
Yeah. And look, I mean, not even that there's a ton of money in BMX.
No, for sure. I just mean like,
but like, if I can be the guy that's got on the phone with someone and or talk to them in person, that's something that like help them live their dream, whether it's riding bikes or anything, by something that I told them. I really enjoyed that part of it. So with that said, just recently, I'm still competing. I'm still, I helped start a Flatland league here in the U.S. I'm, I guess, listed as the founder of it. So starting to kind of look at those things that I can do that I didn't do before.
Yeah.
So right now that league has 3 stops. Last year, the 3 stops, they were all in the U.S. because it's an American league. Because it's time to like build up Flatland here in the U.S. Since
where were those stops?
The first was Vegas, the second was Houston, and then the third was North Carolina.
Cool.
And it's like a league where riders can like build up their points. So I kind of helped rally the troops and get these contest organizers together. So that was the first year last year that we did that league. This year, but also this year, I've kind of had this camera crew follow me around doing this like movie. So they went to all the stops with me, and they weren't only following the stops, but they're also like filming a lot of my home life. Yeah. And so really the goal for this year was to kind of stay around here a little bit, not travel the world, to give, when this movie comes out, to not only give people an opportunity to know what it takes to ride at this level at this age, but also what it takes to do it with a family, and in my case, a kid with a disability, to where I feel like, and I hope that that movie can give some inspiration to someone out there that may be trying to live their dream, no matter what it is. Maybe there's someone out there that has a kid with a disability, and they're able to maybe look at our story that Vanessa and I have, my wife, and what we're going through with our kid, to know that, hey, even though that this is going on, Terry's still out chasing his dream. They're still out there doing the best they can with their child, and they're traveling with their child. They're bringing their child to these different events, and we tried to capture all those moments in hopes to give some people some inspiration for what we're doing. And to go along with the movie, a book is being written that has the exact same name as the movie, which is The Road Home. And the reason that book is called The Road Home, because it's all kind of veering into everything that we've talked about. Is there was a time in my career that all this stuff mattered a lot. Winning these awards and the X Games gold medal sitting here in the covers. There was the past 20 years, that stuff meant a lot. Yeah. But now what really means a lot is like coming back home and being here for my family, and remembering why I started doing this in the first place, because I loved it. I loved the way that bike felt when I was pedaling down the street, and it took me away from these things in life that had me confused. So to come back, and that's why all this stuff, that's why I wanted to name the book and the movie The Road Home, because when all this stuff does come to an end, what's really important in life is the fact that I was able to find something that I loved and that I cherished enough to like hold on to it as long as I could. And that's the plan, to not only still hold on onto these feelings of what it's like to ride this bike, but hopefully in some way give someone out there some inspiration to do what they love.
Man, I was thinking that was like what you just summed up. What you just summed up, and I will sum up even further and shorter, is you found something, you took what you could from where it was at. You are leaving it better for those that are going to come after you. You have found, it seems, the best sense of self and sense of like for your family.
Yeah.
And like, what more could you want out of life than that?
Yeah. No, I'm extremely grateful, bro.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm probably going to wake up tomorrow and say the same thing I say every day is like, I literally can't believe this.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. So
that's great, man. This was great. Thank you so much for doing it.
Dude, thanks for having me. Looking forward for when this drops.
Awesome. There you have it. Thank you so much to Terry Adams for taking time out of his schedule and day to have that talk with me. I'm so glad that we were able to make it happen. Thank you for being here. I bombarded you up front with all the things about liking, subscribing, rating, sharing, all that business. So I won't do it again here. Though I will point out you can follow the show on Instagram. That is at Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know. You can find me personally at Matt O'Donnell. Questions, comments, concerns, requests for stickers, anything you want to tell me, talk to me about, ask me. Yeah, that's questions, comments, concerns. I just said it again in a different way, like I'm trying to fill out a 6th grade English paper. That email address is mattodonnellwantstoKnow@gmail.com. That's going to do it for this time. I will see you back here in a couple of weeks. Take care of yourselves, and remember, the best answer to a question is usually another question. See ya.